You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250, where we look at events that took place 250 years ago this week. This is from the American Revolution Podcast, just a short bonus episode to remind you about these important anniversaries from the Revolution. This week, we remember the Hannah, the first Continental warship, commissioned on August 27, 1775. When George Washington first took command of the Continental Army in June of 1775, there was no Continental Navy. Although the American siege of Boston kept British regulars from leaving or entering the city by land, the British controlled the seas. The British Navy surrounded Boston and regularly monitored the coast. The British encouraged colonists to bring food and supplies to Boston, where they would pay cash for anything needed by the Army. Washington knew that he had no chance of confronting the British Navy directly. It would take years to build or acquire ships that were anywhere close to being large enough to do that. But they could try to interdict merchant ships that were trading with the enemy. Colonel John Glover commanded a regiment from Marblehead, Massachusetts. His men had been sailors before the war. Glover suggested to Washington that they try to use ships to stop merchant vessels from trying to enter Boston. Glover offered his own private ship, the Hannah, to be commissioned for service. The ship was named after his daughter, Hannah Glover. Before the war, the Hannah had been a fishing schooner. It was fitted out with 4 small cannons. These were 4-pounders, which indicates the weight of the cannonballs they fired. The Navy ships carried much larger cannons, which could do real damage to another ship. The Hannah carried less firepower than most British tender ships that worked alongside the larger Navy ships. The Hannah would not be any challenge to the British Navy, but it could try to stop unarmed merchant ships from trading with the British. Because there was no Continental Navy, these ships were actually privateers. But unlike regular privateers that were privately owned, these ships were purchased and owned by the Continental Army. Colonel Glover set to work finding other ships, but his own Hannah was the first to enter service. Washington commissioned Nicholas Broughton as the ship's captain. His orders were to, quote, cruise against such vessels as may be found, both inward and outward, to and from Boston, in the service of the British Army, and to take and seize all such vessels laden with soldiers, arms, ammunition, or provisions, which you shall have good reason to suspect are in such service. The Hannah and its crew and cannons would set sail in early September, only to encounter the British Navy ship, the Lively, and they had to retreat back to the harbor at Gloucester. After the Lively sailed on, the Hannah moved out again, this time capturing the Unity. Now, the owner of this merchant ship, the Unity, was John Langdon, who was a member of the Continental Congress. But the British Navy had taken his ship and was using it to bring food and lumber to Boston. A subsequent fight over the ownership of this prize ship and its cargo led to a mutiny on the Hannah and later a punishment for its crew. The Hannah only remained in service for just over a month. In October, it was badly damaged in another fight with a small British naval sloop. The ship was decommissioned shortly thereafter. The Hannah was the first of a small fleet of ships that unofficially became known as Washington's Navy. In mid-October, around the same time that the Hannah ended her service, the Continental Congress passed a resolution calling for the creation of a real Continental Navy. Today, the U.S. Navy recognizes October 13, 1775, as the birth of the Continental Navy when Congress first approved it. But it really began service with the Hannah on August 23, 1775. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. For more of the story, please visit your favorite podcast platform, including on Apple or Spotify, and subscribe for free to the American Revolution Podcast.